Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu news analysis. Today is 27th December 2024, and in today's class we have some articles from the Hindu newspaper, and apart from that we also have one mains question. So that is based on the India and Central Asia relations, based on which there is an editorial in the Hindu newspaper. So we'll try to discuss that particular editorial as well, and we'll try to generate one question from the editorial and we'll try to discuss that as well. So however, this discussion will be helpful for you because we are going to discuss all those important topics that are being covered in the Hindu newspaper. The first question that with which we are going to start this discussion is India and Central Asia relations. Now we all knew that Central Asia is a very important region. For example, Central Asia consists of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and all those countries that you could see on this map, right? So Central Asia is very important for India, particularly for energy security, for access to critical minerals and connectivity to Russia, and in fact connectivity to Eurasia and Europe. For all those reasons, Central Asia is very important for India. However, Indian government has been planning to enhance its access to the Central Asian region for various reasons. However, India has been facing a lot of the geostrategic challenges, particularly with respect to access to Central Asia. So we'll try to understand what are the challenges that the Indian government has been facing to, particularly with respect to India's access to Central Asia. And we also understand the potential challenges and what are the measures that the Indian government has undertaken in this regard to further strengthen India and Central Asia relations. And this topic is very important for you in Gender Studies paper 2, right? So in Gender Studies paper 2, so this question may be asked. So because of that particular reason, so we are going to discuss this particular question. The question is India's engagement with Central Asian republics. So they are also known as CAR, Central Asian republics. So India's relations or India's engagement with the Central Asian republics is expected to help improve mutual security as well as regional economic prosperity. Now, why regional economic prosperity? Because of commerce, trade and connectivity. And apart from that, as I have already told you, that Central Asian region is known for mineral resources. It is housing or it is home to critical minerals, as well as it also ensures energy security for India. And apart from that, it would also improve mutual security, security of India, and even the region as well, right? So in fact, in Central Asian region, we all knew that there are a lot of terrorist organizations, particularly because of radicalization and fundamentalization. And for India also, terrorism, particularly cross-border terrorism, radicalization, fundamentalism are some of the challenges that India has been facing. Now, in this context, India's strong engagement with the Central Asian republics would ensure both mutual security as well as the regional economic prosperity. Right. So first and foremost, we should talk about the introduction of India's engagement with the Central Asian republics. Now, when we talk about India's engagement with the Central Asian republics, so this is a centuries old relationship, right, from the Indus Valley civilization. So we have centuries old strong cultural linkages with the Central Asian republics. So India's relations with Central Asia has a very long history, right? So we have historical linkages with the Central Asian republics, and in fact India, particularly South Asia or Indian subcontinent, and Central Asia, they have shared deep cultural linkages. So in fact, they have a deep cultural linkages. They're being connected by the culture, and in fact these cultural linkages are being spanned over over 2 millennia in terms of people to people contact, trade and commerce, right? So apart from that, the close trade and cultural linkages between Indian subcontinent and Central Asia, and their beginnings can be traced to the Indus Valley civilization itself, right? So as I have already told you that these are deep cultural relations in terms of trade, economics and commerce between Indian subcontinent as well as the Central Asian region right? So it has its beginning right from the Indus Valley civilization. However, after India's independence in the year 1947, generally what happened, that these cultural linkages, trade, commerce and all other relations with the Central Asian region came to a standstill, right? So they were tapered after India's partition in 1947 because of the Pakistan occupied Kashmir with the Pakistan. And India needs to have Pakistan occupied Kashmir on its side to access Afghanistan and even Central Asia. But recent times, generally what has been happening, Pakistan is not allowing India's access to the Central Asian region. So that's why India has been planning to develop the Chabahar port, and in fact India has already developed the Chabahar port, and through Chabahar port India wanted to access the Central Asian region, and apart from that the international north-south transport corridor. So that is also another way through which India has been planning to access the Central Asian region, because Pakistan is not allowing India's access to Afghanistan and beyond into the Central Asian republics. So this is a major hurdle for India to access the Central Asian region. So that's why after partition in 1947, so the linkages between India and subcontinent as well as the Central Asian region have been tapered, right? So in this context we'll understand India's engagement with the Central Asian republics. Now what are the areas where India has been working with the Central Asian region? Now with most of the countries in the Central Asian region, we have a strong strategic partnership. Now strategic partnership is a comprehensive partnership, and that is being extended to number of areas that countries otherwise don't wanted to engage with the other countries, right? So in fact we have the strategic partnership agreements with most of the countries in the Central Asian region. Particularly with Kazakhstan we have a strategic partnership agreement, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan also. So we have the strategic partnership agreement. So this agreement essentially means that this would deal with trade, commerce, connectivity, security, defense and all other important areas, right? So the strategic partnership agreement essentially aimed at strengthening defense cooperation and also further deepening trade relations between India and the Central Asian republics. So as of now we have the strategic partnership agreements with Kazakhstan, Tajikistan as well as Uzbekistan. And in fact another very important component of India's engagement with the Central Asian region is that in the year 2012 India has launched a policy called Connect Central Asia policy. Now remember that we have Act East policy. Earlier it was known as Look East policy, right? So similar to Act East policy, we also launched Connect Central Asia policy in the year 2012 to further strengthen India's engagement, India's ties with the Central Asian republics, right? So this particular Connect Central Asia policy that was launched in the year 2012 aimed at furthering India's political, economic, historical as well as cultural connections with the region. And apart from that, as I've already told you that for India to access Afghanistan and Central Asia, so Pakistan is important, right? So India has to access the territory of Pakistan to access Afghanistan and Central Asia. But we don't have good relations with Pakistan, and Pakistan generally don't allow India's India's goods passing through the Pakistani's territory, right? Particularly after the abrogation of Article 370 with respect to Jammu and Kashmir, right? So Pakistan has adopted this particular stance. And apart from that, this China-Pakistan economic corridor is also passing through the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and India have the sovereignty concerns, sovereignty and territorial integrity concerns, that India has raised this issue several times with China and Pakistan, right? So because of this particular reason, India has been exploring alternatives how it could access the Central Asian region. So one way that India could actually access the Central Asian region is through the Chabahar port, and India signed a memorandum of understanding with Iran in the year 2015 to develop this Chabahar port, right? So in 2015 there was an MOU between India and Iran to develop the Chabahar port in Sistan and Balochistan province, that was in the doldrums from 2003. So doldrums in the sense that 2000 doldrums in the sense that US has imposed sanctions on Iran. So after US imposed sanctions on Iran, there is also pressure of US on India to stop its particularly trade in crude oil and all other things with Iran. So because of all those reasons, this port is in doldrums. But recent times India has reactivated its engagement with Iran, particularly with respect to Chabahar, to access the Central Asian region, right? So the Chabahar port is not very far from the Gwadar port that is being developed by China in the Balochistan province, right? So both Chabahar port that is being developed by India in Iran and Gwadar port, which is part of China-Pakistan economic corridor, which is located in China, are not very far, right? So apart from that, there are some recent developments in India and Central Asian region or Central Asian republics relations. So we'll try to understand, so what are the recent developments between these two countries, or the Central Asian region as well as India. Now, External Affairs Minister attended 6th Foreign Ministers Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia in Nur Sultan, right? So apart from that, India is known for extending line of credit to the different countries, and India is also known for building high impact community development projects, for example education, healthcare, and even all those projects are being called as high impact community development projects. So even in Afghanistan also, India has developed several of such high impact community development projects. So India so far extended a line of credit of worth of $200 million for the support of developmental projects, and also there was a memorandum of understanding on high impact community development project in the Central Asian region. And apart from that, India is also an active supporter of a peaceful solution to the issue between Armenia and Azerbaijan about Nagorno and Karabakh. So Nagorno and Karabakh is a territorial dispute between two countries, Armenia and Azerbaijan. So the conflict between these two countries has been stabilizing the entire Central Asia, and because of that particular reason, so India always supports dialogue and diplomacy and peaceful resolution of disputes between both Armenia and Azerbaijan. So but recent times Azerbaijan has adopted anti-India stance in the sense that it has been supporting the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and in fact Azerbaijan, Turkey and Pakistan have formed an axis. So because of that reason, now India is also sending weapons, and India is also having weapons deals or weapon selling deals with the Armenia as well, right? So this is with respect to Nagorno and Karabakh, but India is always the supporter of peaceful resolution of a dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So if you look at the Central Asian map, you can clearly understand, and you can also locate all these countries in the Central Asian region. So however, Armenia and Azerbaijan, so they are like part of the Eastern Europe. However, there are certain challenges that India has been facing when it comes to India's access to the Central Asian region. So it is important for us to understand what are the challenges that India has been facing with respect to its access to the Central Asian region. Now, it's not just about the access. When it comes to India's engagement with the Central Asian region, it has been facing some challenges, and we'll try to understand those challenges as well. So we have already discussed that India's efforts to have a greater access to the Central Asian region are very often stonewalled by Pakistan's lack of willingness to allow India passage through its territory. Now, Pakistan always says no to Indian goods or Indian vehicles passing through its territory to access Afghanistan and even the Central Asian region. Now, it is very important that India can access Central Asia through land route only through Pakistan occupied Kashmir and then Pakistan and then Afghanistan, but Pakistan is not allowing, and that is one of the main concern that India has been facing. And apart from that, I have also emphasized on this right I have also emphasized on China-Pakistan economic corridor. So this China-Pakistan economic corridor is also passing through the Gilgit-Baltistan of the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and India time and again raised objections about the China-Pakistan economic corridor, which has been passing through the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, because it has been violating India's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and India never joined the Belt and Road Initiative, but most of India's neighbors are part of the Belt and Road Initiative except Bhutan. So Bhutan is not part of the Belt and Road Initiative of China, but all other India's neighbors are already part of it, and China is also actively investing in those respective countries as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. So CPEC is certainly a concern for India, right? So a growing geostrategic and security concerns regarding the Belt and Road Initiative of China-Pakistan economic corridor, and also violation of India's sovereignty and territorial integrity as well. So there is a growing axis between Iran, Pakistan, and even China as well, right? So why? Because in recent times India is moving very, very close to US as well. So that is also another factor, and Iran and US don't have good relations with each other. So all these geopolitics have been determining India's engagement with the Central Asian region. So what should be the way forward in this context? It is also very important that we should also discuss a way forward, an appropriate way forward, right? So most of the Central Asian leaders actually view India as a potential balancer, a potential stabilizer in the region, right? So they also look at India's Chabahar port that India has developed in Iran as an opportunity that they could diversify their export markets, and they could also control China's ambitions, because China as of now has a dominant position in the Central Asian region. However, for any region, one single country's domination would not be good in the long term. However, they are looking at India as a potential balancer in the region against China's and increasing ambitions in the Central Asian region. However, Russia is also encouraging that, because China's dominance in the Central Asian region is not in the best interest of Russia as well. So they have admitted New Delhi into the Ashgabat Agreement. So there was an agreement called Ashgabat Agreement among all these Central Asian countries, and they allowed India into this Ashgabat Agreement, allowing access to connectivity networks in the Central Asian region, and these connectivity networks will play a very important role in facilitating trade, commercial interactions with both Central Asia as well as the larger Eurasia. And also India can actually access natural resources in the region. And apart from that, there is also a rising anti-Chinese sentiments in the region, particularly in the Central Asian region. So that is another area where it has been creating a vacuum that India could actually fulfill that vacuum, and India could also actually act as a potential balancer. So that will help Central Asian countries to potentially diversify their relations with different countries in the region. And apart from that, Taliban also came to power in Afghanistan. So that is also another challenge that India has been facing, right? So because Taliban coming to power in Afghanistan, so it could also create new problems in terms of radicalization, Islamic fundamentalism, terrorism, and that is not in the best interest of the entire region, right? So that is another major concern for India and the Central Asian region. So Central Asian countries have been keen to have India as a partner, because they wanted to diversify their strategic ties with number of countries, and India has India has been fulfilling all the eligibility criteria to be a strategic partner for most of the Central Asian countries in the CAR region, right? So I hope you have understood that about India and Central Asian regions engagement, right? So what are the the present status of India Central Asian ties, what are the challenges, what India has did, and what should be done. Now the next topic is that which is given in today's newspaper, right? So strengthening fisheries extension services in India. Now fisheries is a very important sector in India. This is a primary sector. Fisheries is important because it has been providing livelihood opportunities for a most number of people, because we have a huge coast. So having a huge coast means that it provides livelihood opportunities, both inland fish as well as marine fish. And India has also been exporting a lot of fish into the foreign countries, so thereby it has been earning forex reserves as well. A forex reserve potential contributor to the forex reserves, and it has been providing livelihood for the fishermen communities. And apart from providing livelihood, what are the other benefits it has been providing? For example, nutritional security, right? So it has been providing, we could say it has been providing food security, nutritional security, livelihood opportunities, and it also one of the key component of women empowerment in coastal states, right? Because women have been working in the food processing industries, and women themselves are starting the food processing industries, particularly involving fisheries. So we could say that a lot of benefits from the fisheries sector, and India is one of the largest exporter of fisheries. India is also one of the largest producer of fishery. Now don't you think that in this context we need scientific intervention from the government, right? So because of this particular reason, so the government has launched a number of policies. Government has also launched a number of schemes as well as initiatives which aimed at the sustainable generation of fishery resources, strengthening the livelihoods of the fisheries community, and also nutritional security, women empowerment, right? So the government of India has been planning to further extend the extension services to the fishery sector. So we'll understand the importance of the fishery sector through some data that has been given over here, right? So in fact, as I have already told you that we have a huge coast, right? So we have a huge coastal area, and because of that reason, India is one of the largest producer of fish. And in fact, India possesses diverse fishery resources, whether it is inland fish, marine water fish, deep water fishing. So we could say that we have a diverse fishery resources, and these diverse fishery resources could actually provide livelihood opportunities for approximately 3 crore fishers and fish farmers, right? It has been providing livelihood opportunities for 3 crore fishers and fish farmers across India, and this number could be more than 3 crore as well, right? And in fact, India has witnessed around 83% increase in the national fish production since 2013 and 14, right? So through green revolution, what we have done through green revolution, we have substantially increased food production, and through white revolution we have increased milk production. However, through blue revolution we also have substantially increased the production of fish, because compared to 2013-14 levels, so there is approximately 83% increase in the national fish production, and that actually stands at 175 lakh tons, right? So this is essentially 175 lakh tons by the year 22 and 23. And apart from, out of 175 lakh tons, around 75% of the total fish has been coming from the inland fish as well, because we have a lot of expertise, technology, as well as resources to produce inland fish in a large scale. And out of 175 lakh tons of fish that is being produced in India, 75% of it from inland fisheries itself. And India is also the second largest fish and aquaculture producer globally, right? So it is the second largest fish and aquaculture producer globally. And in fact, because of that particular reason that I have mentioned, that aquaculture sector has been contributing to the exports, it boosts exports, it ensures nutrition security, it earns forex reserves, and it also provides livelihood opportunities for the farmers, and it also ensures women empowerment, food processing industry. So because of all those reasons, it is very important that we need to look after the fisheries sector as well. So in order to ensure the success and sustainability of the fisheries sector, we need to provide extension services as well, right? So what sort of extension services that the government has been planning to extend to the fishery sector? So that is what we are going to understand in this particular discussion, right? So the government will provide request based services to the fishers and fish farmers. Now see, providing awareness, educating the farmers, and in fact empowering them with adequate knowledge over the fish cultivation is very, very important to substantially increase the fish production. Now apart from increasing the fish production and production of fish at sustainable scale, and that would also overcome sanitary and phytosanitary measures that India has been facing in other developed countries when it comes to export of the fish. So therefore, government could actually provide request based services to the fishers as well as fish farmers. And in fact, government can also address issues faced by the seed growers as well as hatcheries, right? So in fact, hatcheries, there are a lot of hatcheries, in most of these coastal areas, and these hatcheries are also facing a lot of technical problems, right? So because of those technical problems, so they are also incurring deep losses. Now in this context, it is very, very important that the government should address the issues that the seed growers and hatcheries have been facing, and it is important that the government can extend subsidy. The government can also provide them access to new technologies and access to institutional credit. So all these facilities have to be provided for them. And apart from that, it is also very important that through interventions there is a need to provide need-based training to promote sustainable practices and also fisheries based activities that have potential to be viable business models in the long term. So remember that, as I've already told you, that in future also fishery sector has a lot of potential, right? So India could become a global leader when it comes to the fish production and export as well, and it could also provide a huge forex reserves. It could also provide employment opportunities, and it could also give a push to the food processing industry as well. So because of the future potential of the fisheries sector, it is very important that the government should come up with appropriate interventions in the sector. And we need to understand the role of Matsya Seva Kendras that the government has established to provide extension services to the fishery farmers, right? So we all knew that the government has launched Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. So this is one of the flagship scheme that the union government has launched particularly for the fishery sector, for the holistic development of the fishery sector, that is Prime Minister Matsya Sampada Yojana. So under a PM Matsya Sampada Yojana, the government will establish Matsya Seva Kendras. Now what these Matsya Seva Kendras will do? And these Matsya Seva Kendras will function as a one-stop solution to provide a range of extension services by trained aquaculture professionals. So there will be trained aquaculture professionals in these Matsya Seva Kendras, and they will provide all the extension services to the fisheries as well as the fish farmers. And that is the first objective of Matsya Seva Kendras, which are being established under PM Matsya Sampada Yojana. And in fact, the government is also providing assistance to set up such Kendras, such Matsya Seva Kendras for women and even weaker sections also. Remember that fishery sector is one of the potential employment creator for women as well, and it could also result in the women empowerment. And because of that reason, under Matsya Sampada Yojana, government is also considering establishing Matsya Seva Kendras for women and weaker sections. And even funds have been provided to state governments and even union territories for operationalizing already sanctioned 102 Matsya Seva Kendras. So there are around 102 Matsya Seva Kendras which are being already sanctioned and they are operational as well. So government of India advises these Matsya Seva Kendras to mobilize startups, cooperatives, fish farmers producer organizations, joint liability groups and self-help groups to share best practices that they have followed and that substantially increased the productivity and that substantially increased their incomes, because those best practices can be shared with the other fishery farmers as well, so thereby ensuring the overall sustainability and holistic development of the fishery sector in India, right? So apart from that, apart from Matsya Seva Kendras, government has also been providing Sagar Mitras to support the fisheries and fisher farmers, right? So through such innovative interventions in the fishery sector, so innovative extension initiative, so that is deployment of Sagar Mitras in the coastal areas, particularly the coastal states and union territories. So for example, there are some union territories, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Lakshadweep and Puducherry. So those union territories, and in fact it is considered as an interface between the government and seaborne fishers. So it is specifically for the seaborne fishers. So they venture into deep sea fishing and they disseminate information to the fishers about local regulations, weather forecasts, natural calamities, hygiene, fish handling, and also potential fishing zones in the sea. So they advise the seaborne fishers on all these aspects. For example, what are local regulations? Local regulations in the sense that there are some states, for example Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, so they impose a fishing ban, fishing ban for 2 months every year, right? So those 2 months are the season, fish breeding season, and because of that reason there's no need to disturb the fish populations, because it is very important season, it is a breeding season, and because of that reason, so those 2 months would be the fish ban. So these Sagar Mitras will actually empower the seaborne fishers with adequate information about all these different aspects. So that's how the government has been planning to bring in certain initiatives and such interventions to essentially enhance the income of the fishermen and at the same time encourage sustainable fish production practices in India. Now next topic is an unfortunate it is very unfortunate that India lost former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, and because of his immense contribution to this country, it is important for us to discuss what are the major achievements, what are the policies that Manmohan Singh has brought, what are the important legislations that the government has brought in during his tenure, right? So it is a small tribute for Dr. Manmohan Singh, right, for his demise. And we'll understand the context. We all knew the context, that former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, and he is also rightly called as architect of India's economic reforms, right? So he is one of the main architect of India's economic reforms, so which is also known as 1991 economic reforms, liberalization, globalization or privatization. So he passed away yesterday at the age of 92. And in fact, former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh is remembered for his role in shaping modern India's economic landscape, especially his contributions as finance minister in the year 1991. Now, when India has gone for economic reforms in the year 1991, now at that point of time the finance minister was Dr. Manmohan Singh. And at that point of time, India faced severe economic crisis. In response to the severe economic crisis, that we do not have adequate forex reserves with us to import essential commodities or essential supplies such as crude oil. So in response to 1991 economic reforms, so Prime Minister was P.V. Narasimha Rao, and finance minister was Dr. Manmohan Singh, and they have gone for the LPG reforms, right? So 1991 economic reforms, and that has actually decided India's course of action, the economic course of action, and that has also resulted in a tremendous growth rates of India after that, because it has resulted in end of license Raj, end of permit Raj, right? So that was the main practice since 1991, and India has also liberalized its economy. India started linking its economy with the global economies, global supply chains as well. Now in this context, it is very important that whatever Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has done for this country, so we should try to discuss this very briefly. So Manmohan Singh's legacy as an economist in India. So as we have already discussed this, that former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh's liberalization policies in early 1990s, so they are being implemented with Prime Minister PV Narasimha Rao, and these LPG reforms or 1991 economic reforms have, we could say that they have transformed India's economy, right? So in fact, it has resulted in a transition of Indian economy from a country, a near sovereign default, to growing market economy. Now India is now a growing market economy, right? So in 1991, India almost goes to the verge of sovereign default. But these 1991 economic reforms saved India. Now we are a growing market economy and one of the fastest growing major economies in the world. And we are also consistently registering, registering a good amount of growth rates as well. And now we are the third largest economy in PPP terms, and we are the fifth largest economy in terms of GDP. And it is also expected that India very soon by 2030 will become the third largest economy as well, after US and China. So economic reforms of 1990s are particularly aimed at liberalizing trade. So trade will be liberalized, that countries can import, India can import certain goods from other countries, and India can also export certain goods to other countries. So we could say that linking India with the global economy. And apart from that, finance and industry, India allowed FDI into different sectors. India has liberalized its FDI regime, and apart from that, government has also privatized some of the government completely, which some sectors which are completely controlled by the government, set a stage for India's decades-long economic growth and also lifting millions out of poverty. So the economic reforms actually helped India lift millions of people out of poverty line, and India has also integrated itself into the global value chains, the global supply chains, as well as the global economy. And apart from that, he also brought in certain administrative and political contributions as well. For example, we need to talk about Right to Information Act was brought in during his tenure. And apart from Right to Information Act, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, a flagship program which ensures income security for the rural poor in rural areas, and it also ensures livelihood security, and it would also result in the community resource creation or generation. So such schemes were brought in during the prime ministership of Dr. Manmohan Singh. And National Food Security Act has also been brought in during the prime ministership of Dr. Manmohan Singh, and it provides subsidized food grains to the BPL families. And National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, as I have already told you, that it ensures income security for the rural poor. Okay, so ensures income security for the rural poor, and it also ensures livelihood security for rural poor, and it arrests rural urban migration, right? So it also arrests rural urban migration because of distress farming or distress agriculture, and it also results in community resource generation or community resource creation, right? So these are the benefits of Manrega Act that was brought during the prime ministership of Dr. Manmohan Singh. So actually these two schemes played a very important role in alleviating poverty. According to 2011 census, around there is 21% of India's total population are poor, right? So 21% of India's total population are poor according to 2011 census. Now India has brought down this number to around 15% of India's total population, still below the poverty line. And apart from that, the Right to Information Act, so that is considered as one of the hallmark of transparency, and that was also brought into effect during the prime ministership of Dr. Manmohan Singh, right? So in fact it is considered as one of the most important and most significant step to bring in transparency and accountability into the governance, right? So RTI has made the public servants accountable for their actions, for their decisions that they have actually made. And another remarkable contribution of Dr. Manmohan Singh was, India was almost isolated because of its nuclear tests. In 1999, India has conducted nuclear tests, and because of that reason, India was almost isolated by all the countries, right? So at that point of time, so India had a nuclear India had a civil nuclear cooperation agreement with the US, and that's where India's economy started linking with the global economy. Number of other countries are also started recognizing India, and they started identifying or recognizing India's credentials as a credible nuclear weapon state. Whatever technology that India possesses with respect to nuclear nuclear energy or nuclear weapons, and that could be used for the peaceful purposes alone. So the world started recognizing this element of India's nuclear arsenal. So therefore his leadership has strengthened Indo-US relations, and that has culminated in the 2008 civil nuclear deal. So we had a civil nuclear deal with the US in the year 2008, and that has played a very important role in India's integration with the global political and the economic systems. So India has integrated itself with the political and economic systems, because till then India was like almost isolated by almost all the countries, that those countries don't like India conducting nuclear tests. However, this is a turning point. India-US civil nuclear cooperation deal, that was a turning point for India. Right now, the next topic is about inequality, growing levels of inequalities in India, and also experts demanding for the wealth tax, imposition of wealth tax on rich individuals, right? So we all knew that Oxfam time and again has been telling us that inequalities have been very high in India. Income inequality, wealth inequality is very high in India. Now as of now, we don't have the concept of wealth tax on the wealthy individuals. We don't have such concept, right? However, now because of rising inequalities in India, particularly after the globalization, what experts have been demanding? So experts have been demanding, now in India also there are number of billionaires as well, right? So experts demanding that there is a need to introduce wealth tax in India. So with wealth tax, what generally happens, government could actually raise more taxes, right? So it would result in more tax revenue for the government. So more tax revenue can be substantially invested in sectors like education plus healthcare plus infrastructure generation, right? So now if you look at government spending in these sectors, education, healthcare, infrastructure, it is a very low amount of expenditure on these different sectors. Because what is the reason? In India, tax to GDP ratio, so tax to GDP ratio is significantly low. So even compared to all the BRICS countries or G20 countries, tax to GDP ratio is substantially low, and because of that reason, India's tax basket, so India's tax basket is very small. However, we wanted that this tax basket to be very large, so that when we have a large tax basket, we could finance education, we could finance healthcare, we could also create infrastructure, and that would result in what? That would result in poverty alleviation. That would result in poverty alleviation. And apart from poverty alleviation, so it would also result in minimizing potential inequalities in India, right? So this is how India could actually minimizing potential inequalities. So this is how India can actually minimize inequalities through the wealth taxation that increases tax to GDP ratio, and government would have more tax revenue, and this tax revenue can be used in financing all these different sectors, and that could result in poverty alleviation and also further result in minimizing income inequalities, economic inequalities, because with poverty alleviation and investment in good education, good healthcare, so people would also develop their capacities, right? So that is the entire concept of the wealth taxation, right? So the context is that Indian economy has been witnessing the growing issue of economic inequality, and therefore there is a need for progressive fiscal policies, right? Because of economic inequality, there is a need for progressive fiscal policies, specifically focusing on taxation of ultra high net worth individuals. So UHNWIs are ultra high net worth individuals. So therefore there is a need for the taxation of ultra high net worth individuals, particularly in the form of wealth tax, or introducing a wealth tax. Now, what is the need for increased public spending on the part of the government? Now, why the government should invest more money on public spending, particularly infrastructure creation, education and healthcare, right? So despite a strong aggregate income growth, a large portion of India's population so still lacking some basic facilities. So they're still lacking some basic necessities, such as they lack access to basic necessities such as food, healthcare, education and housing, right? So we all know that there are still a substantial number of people below poverty line. There are substantially a high number of people, they're still houseless, they're living in slums in different cities across India. And in India, the quality of education, quality of healthcare is also not up to the level, not up to the mark. And in fact, India's spending on education and healthcare is also very poor, and you can also see India's ranking in global hunger index, right? So in those indexes also India has been performing very, very badly. So looking at all these aspects, you could come to the conclusion, you can come to assertion that there is a need that the government should spend more on these different sectors, right? Particularly a social welfare spending. This is called as social welfare spending, and to do that, government should have more finances with itself. And secondly, India's public investments in climate change, another important area, particularly adaptation and mitigation, right? So India's investments in climate change adaptation and mitigation and also on green transition is significantly insufficient, right? So it remains insufficient, leaving vulnerable populations at risk of natural disasters and even environmental degradation as well. So when we talk about the impact of environmental degradation, impact of disasters, natural disasters, it is very high on vulnerable people such as poor people, houseless people, people who lack basic necessities such as food, healthcare, education and all, right? So India's spending on climate change mitigation and adaptation and even transition to a green economy is also substantially low. So in this context, India require more and more finances to invest in these areas, And apart from that, there is also rising income and asset inequalities in India, right? So income inequalities have been increasing, asset inequalities are also being increasing, where top 10 percentage of India's population have been they benefit from the disproportionate amount of economic gains, and that has led to the stagnation of mass consumption and even hindering the overall economic growth as well. So we could conclude that economic inequalities have been impacting the overall economic growth as well, because people don't have adequate means. When people don't have adequate means, how they can they can create demand in the economy, right? So demand in the economy is also very important, but majority number of people still living with a very scarce amount of resources, and they may not be able to create adequate demand. If they don't create the demand, so how can we give fillip to the economic growth? And insufficiency in India's tax system, right? So what sort of insufficiency in the Indian taxation system that we have been experiencing? As I have already explained, that India's tax to GDP ratio is significantly lower. Even if you compare it with several other developing countries or middle income countries and G20 countries, so India's tax to GDP ratio is comparatively very low. So thereby it has been limiting government's overall capacity to increase public spending on certain essential areas. For example, education, healthcare, housing, food. In all those areas, government is not able to spend adequately because government don't have adequate resources. Why? Because the tax to GDP ratio is significantly low in India. And apart from that, government's taxation, or particularly India's tax, is known as regressive taxation system. It is not a progressive taxation system, and there is no concept of wealth taxation as well in India. But India's tax system is regressive in the sense that now India's middle class and poor has been facing the major burden of the taxes, right? So this regressive taxation is also known as indirect taxation. This is also known as indirect taxation, right? So indirect taxes, the burden of indirect taxation has been substantially increasing on countries' middle class and poor. However, rich continue to benefit from the lower tax burdens, right? So this is a clear injustice, and it has also been stressing on the need to impose wealth taxation. And apart from that, there is a need for progressive fiscal policy, that is a higher taxation for people who are considered as super rich, ultra high net worth individuals. And the government of India should introduce progressive taxation instead of relying on regressive taxation, and that is the need of the hour, and that's how the government can actually widen its tax basket, right? So there are some proposals for taxing the super rich individuals, and in fact there is a growing consensus at the international level taxing these ultra high net worth individuals, right? So it is being evidenced by G20 summit and even reports by economists like Gabriel Zuckman, advocating for a global minimum wealth tax. So there is a need for global minimum wealth tax, taxing ultra high net worth individuals, so that the tax basket of the governments can be widened. Governments can have more resources that can be spent on the social welfare, that can be spent on climate change adaptation and mitigation. However, so some people have been arguing that wealth tax is unfeasible. We cannot implement the wealth taxation. But as of now, we have achieved a tremendous levels of digitization in financial records, and even we have the better tracking of real estate assets as well, right? So digitization and end-to-end tracking of real estate assets have made it increasingly possible to implement such taxes effectively in India, particularly the progressive taxation and wealth taxation. However, if we wanted to implement a wealth tax on super rich individuals, because we understand, because of neoliberal policies, inequalities is not just inequality as a phenomenon that can be seen not just in India, but it is a global phenomenon, and in fact developed countries are also experiencing the inequalities, right? So therefore there is a global consensus that has been growing to tax the ultra high net worth individuals. They are being considered as super rich, right? So this requires global tax cooperation, and that would help curb tax avoidance by ultra high net worth individuals, and it would also ensure that it contribute fairly to the country's economic needs as well. So that's how the authors have been strongly suggesting for the imposition of wealth tax, and that could enhances country's efficiency to finance the social welfare as well as the climate change related measures, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. Right.